They were not supposed to find anything there, especially not something hidden under a card in plain sight. And at first it looked like nothing more than an old leather case pushed into the dirt, until Otto pulled it into the light, felt the weight inside, saw the lock still sealed, and realized that in a camp where every object was counted, labeled, and recorded, this was the one thing that had no name, no number, and no one willing to claim it. Before sunrise, Otto Weiss crossed the yard with two folded blankets under his arm and turned toward the laundry shed just as the night watch changed near the fence. A wooden cart stood beside the wall, one wheel dark with tar, and something under it caught the weak light. Otto stopped, crouched, and saw the corner of a leather case pushed beneath the axle where no camp tool had ever been stored. He set the blankets on a barrel, reached under the cart, and dragged the case into the open. It was smaller than a ration crate, but heavier than it looked, wrapped in cracked brown leather with brass corners and a lock at the front. Otto wiped mud from the lid with his sleeve and turned it slowly, checking for a painted number, initials, or a camp stamp, but the surface showed only scratches and rain marks. Two prisoners from the water detail saw him kneeling and came over at once. One lifted the box and tested the weight, then shook it near his ear and heard a dull shift inside. Not loose coins or tools, but flat objects moving together. Otto took it back, pressed his thumb against the lock, and tugged gently at the lid. It held tight. The whistle for early work sounded from the gate, yet none of the three moved. A guard crossing from the pump changed direction when he saw them still crouched in the dirt. Otto stood and held out the case with both hands, explaining that it had been hidden under the cart. The guard checked the axle, looked at the leather handle, and called for the laundry foreman. The foreman stepped out, saw the case, and said at once that it was not part of his equipment. They walked together to the administration hut. Inside, the clerk cleared a place beneath the desk lamp, opened a ledger, and asked Otto for the exact location and time. He wrote everything down, then turned the case in front of them and noted what it lacked. No number, no label, no owner mark. After that, he sent a runner to the nearest barracks with orders to ask whether any prisoner had lost a locked personal box during the past week. The question spread quickly through the camp. Men carrying lumber were asked. Men at the kitchen line were asked. The guards outside the infirmary were asked whether a patient had reported missing property. Every answer came back the same. No one had lost such a case. No one had seen one before, and no one could produce a key. By noon, the clerk had added 3 new lines to the ledger and moved the box to a shelf behind his desk. At dinner, word reached the mess hall before Otto entered. Men turned in their seats, pointed over their trays, and called him over with questions. One prisoner asked whether the box held cigarettes. Another asked whether it was a money case. A third laughed and said the Americans had planted it to catch thieves. Otto gave no answer and kept eating while the guesses moved from table to table faster than the soup line. That afternoon, the commandant ordered a notice posted beside the water pump and outside the mess hall. The paper stated in English that a locked case had been found and that any claimant must identify the contents or produce a key. Before evening roll call, the interpreter read the notice aloud in German. Prisoners stepped closer to hear, then stepped back again without speaking. No owner appeared. After lights out, the barracks stayed awake longer than usual. Men leaned from their bunks and traded theories through the dark while boots dried near the stove. Some said the case belonged to a dead officer. Others said it had arrived with Red Cross parcels and been hidden by mistake. Otto lay still on his bunk and listened, because in a camp where blankets, spoons, tools, and names were counted every day, one locked object had entered the yard without a mark and without a claimant. The next morning, the box was moved from the administration shelf to the workshop, and Otto was called to stand as witness because he had found it. A civilian locksmith from the nearby town arrived with a black case of tools and set them in a straight line on the bench beside the leather box. Guards took positions by the door while the commandant and the clerk stood with the ledger open. The locksmith did not touch the keyway at first. He lifted the case in both hands, weighed it, pressed a finger along the hinges, and studied the stitching around the handle. Then he turned the lid toward the window and pointed to a faint circle and two clean scratches near the center, marks that looked as though something once tied there had been cut away. The clerk wrote that detail into the record at once. Only then did the locksmith try the lock. He inserted two narrow tools, made a careful turn, and stopped. After a second attempt, he withdrew the picks and explained that the mechanism had been blocked from inside by a thin metal sliver, placed there on purpose to prevent quick opening. The commandant ordered that the box was not to be forced until its origin had been checked. That delay changed the entire camp before noon. Prisoners began looking under bunks, inside lockers, and behind stovepipes for missing straps, labels, or keys that might connect someone to the case. Men who had laughed the previous night now crossed the yard asking direct questions. Had anyone seen a leather box before transfer? Had anyone heard the name of a previous owner? Each new rumor pulled another prisoner into the search. By midday, a military quartermaster arrived in a dusty jeep carrying supply diagrams and transport records. He measured the case, compared the brass corners with his papers, and checked the hinge spacing with a ruler. When he finished, he said the box was not standard Army issue. It had been privately made or purchased. That answer closed one path and opened several more, because a personal case in a POW camp should still have had an owner. In the late afternoon, a sharp movement near the workshop door changed everything again. Becker, a prisoner from Barrack D, slipped out of the clothing line and tried to reach the corridor where the box was being kept. A sentry stopped him before he touched the handle. During the search, the guard found a bent wire in Becker's pocket and a small piece of soap marked with the pressed shape of a keyhole. Becker was taken straight to the commandant's office while the rest of the line froze outside. Within minutes, the whole camp knew that someone had tried to get close to the case before it was officially opened. The object that had begun as a curiosity now became a target. Men at supper watched one another more than they watched the serving line, trying to decide whether Becker knew something or had only wanted to be first. The commandant reacted at once. The box was removed from the workshop and locked in the infirmary safe, a place prisoners could not approach without escort. 2 guards were assigned to witness every future handling. After that, the interpreter assembled the barracks leaders and delivered a new order. Any claim on the case had to be made by sunrise the next morning, and any false claim would bring punishment. That night, the camp felt quieter than on the first evening. No one joked openly now. Men spoke in short, low exchanges near the barrack doors, and heads turned each time boots crossed the yard. The locked case had not been opened, yet it had already changed the rhythm of the camp. It had drawn a locksmith, a quartermaster, a formal deadline, and one prisoner foolish enough to risk punishment just to get near it. At sunrise, no claimant came forward, so the commandant ordered the opening to take place in the mess hall under witness. After breakfast, benches were pushed back and a single table was set under the high windows. The locksmith stood on one side, the clerk on the other, and selected prisoner representatives from each barrack were brought in to watch. Otto stood near the front, close enough to see every movement of the locksmith's hands. The lock was opened slowly. First, the faceplate came free. Then the thin sliver of brass lodged inside the mechanism was removed and shown to the witnesses. When the tumblers finally clicked, the room did not move. The locksmith lifted the lid only an inch before it caught against tightly packed papers. The clerk pulled on gloves, raised the lid further, and began removing the contents one piece at a time. First came a bundle of folded letters tied with faded blue ribbon, then a leather notebook, then 4 black and white photographs wrapped in wax paper. After those came several foreign banknotes and a small brass key on a short string tag whose writing had been partly scraped away. Each item was laid in a separate row on the cloth while the clerk read it into the ledger. The interpreter opened the first letter and read the outer name aloud. It was addressed to Friedrich Kessler. The next letter carried the same name. So did the third. None of the prisoner representatives reacted at once. No one in the room claimed to know a man by that name. The notebook was then opened, and the pages showed dates, place names, and columns of numbers written in careful, narrow lines. The photographs changed the room more than the letters had. They showed camp compounds, rail sidings, supply sheds, and towers from more than one location, not all from the same country and not all from the same period. One image clearly showed an American vehicle in the background. Another captured rows of parcel crates stacked beside a transport wagon. The commandant ordered the hall doors shut and kept only the selected witnesses inside. The letters were unfolded fully and proved not to be family letters at all. Several contained copied schedules, names of officers, and short-coded references to train movements. The notebook matched that pattern. The numbers aligned with dates, deliveries, and transfers. The small brass key did not fit the box itself, and when the quartermaster returned and examined it, he said the stamped number matched a locker series used at an earlier transfer compound in Italy. The clerk then searched old camp transfer lists and found the first real lead. Friedrich Kessler appeared in a record from the previous year, marked as a prisoner moved south and later listed as hospitalized after an air raid. The file did not show a final status. More importantly, his property inventory at transfer was incomplete, with one personal case marked missing during transport. The commandant read that line twice before looking back at the table. By late afternoon, military intelligence had been called to the camp. The contents were sealed into separate envelopes, but the photographs remained out long enough to be copied because the paper had begun to curl. Otto watched from the doorway while the clerk pressed each image flat beneath glass. What had been found under a cart was no longer a mystery object. It had become a surviving record tied to a missing prisoner whose name had not yet reached an ending. That evening, the barracks sounded different. Men no longer asked whether the box held money or tobacco. They spoke in lower voices about Kessler, about why a prisoner would carry copies of schedules and camp images, and about how such a case could cross camps and borders without ever being claimed. The lid had opened, but the real weight of the discovery had only begun to spread. The next day, intelligence officers took over a side room near the administration hut and covered the windows with blankets. Typewriters were set on two desks, a camera was fixed to a tripod, and prisoners whose records matched names or locations from the notebook were called in one by one. Otto went first because he had found the box and had seen exactly where it lay. During his interview, an officer placed a copied notebook page under the lamp. In the margin beside one date and rail number was a tiny sketch of a cart with one wheel darkened in black. Otto recognized it at once. It matched the laundry cart under which he had found the box. The officer stopped writing and ordered the shed area sealed immediately. By noon, the ground beneath the shed wall had been dug in a narrow square. Under one loose plank, the search team found a packet wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were 3 more photographs and a folded camp map drawn by hand. The map showed meal times, guard routes, and blind angles between the laundry yard and the infirmary path. Whatever Kessler had carried, he had not hidden it all in one place. That second discovery triggered a full barracks search. Mattresses were lifted, lockers emptied, floorboards tapped, and jacket linings checked for stitched compartments. Prisoners stood outside in lines while guards and clerks moved through their sleeping rows. No weapons were found, but small papers began to appear. Copied transport numbers, scraps of parcel counts, and short-coded references that matched the notebook entries. Becker was questioned again after the searches began. This time he admitted he did not own the box and had never seen Kessler. But he had heard in a transfer camp that a hidden case containing lists might still surface if the earlier hides survived transport. He had made the wax keyway impression from memory, hoping to guess the lock before anyone else reached the contents. His confession did not solve ownership, but it proved the case had lived as rumor long before Otto found it. Later that afternoon, the officers brought in Lenz from the infirmary convalescent ward because his name appeared twice in the copied letters. Lenz moved with a cane and had been easy to overlook in camp life. but he recognized one of the new photographs at once. It showed a transit yard near Bologna. He then identified Friedrich Kessler as a clerk prisoner who had worked in several camp offices, sorting parcels and transport rosters. Lenz explained that Kessler had not worked alone. He had been part of a small circle of prisoners who copied movements, deliveries, and personnel names because the front was shifting and records were beginning to vanish. Their goal had been to preserve a trail showing where men were sent and what supplies reached them. During an air raid on one transfer route, the group broke apart, and Kessler disappeared with the main case. That statement changed the direction of the investigation. The route sketches and blind angles on the map could help an escape, but the parcel counts and names served another purpose entirely. The box had carried both evidence and opportunity in the same leather shell. That explained why one man might want it to preserve records while another might want it to use the routes. By evening, the commandant issued a new order in the yard. No prisoner would be punished merely for appearing in Kessler's papers unless direct theft or sabotage was proven, but all hidden notes had to be surrendered before morning. The effect was immediate. After supper, men stepped out of line and handed over scraps from boots, mug bottoms, mattress seams, and prayer books. The camp that had first gathered around one unclaimed box was now emptying its own hidden record into the open. Before dawn, a sentry heard scraping behind the old bakery wall near the north fence and found a prisoner trying to work loose a brick with the handle of a spoon. The prisoner was Ernst Voller, a quiet laborer from Barak F, who rarely drew attention. When the brick came free, the guard reached inside and pulled out a narrow tin tube wrapped in cloth. Voller was seized on the spot and marched under escort to the intelligence room. Inside the tube was a folded strip of waxed paper written in the same narrow hand as the notebook from the box. The message was brief. It instructed any finder who still possessed the case not to surrender the contents to random claimants, but only to a man marked by a scar over the left thumb and a missing first joint on the little finger. Voller had both marks. The officer read the note once, then ordered the box contents brought in again. Voller did not deny the message. He placed his hands flat on the desk and said Kessler had packed the case during the transfer chaos in Italy after deciding that too much material had been gathered to carry openly. The main file was sealed in the box. Smaller packets were hidden separately. Voller had been meant to recover the case later, but he had been diverted to a hospital train after the air raid and eventually shipped to America under another list. The officers pressed him on the route sketches and blind angles. Voller answered by asking to see the copied parcel sheets. When they were laid out, he pointed to repeated shortages between named depots and compounds, then to transport rosters where prisoner numbers changed without matching hospital or burial reports. He explained that Kessler's purpose had been to preserve a chain of movement and supply. Others, after the group broke apart, had added route notes that could also serve an escape. To test him, the officers produced one item never mentioned in earlier questioning: the foreign banknotes wrapped beneath the photographs. Voller identified the currencies in order and explained why Kessler had kept old notes from shifting fronts rather than current cash. Then he described one final photograph that should still exist, an image of parcel stacks beside fuel drums at a siding. That photograph had not yet been found. A fresh search began at once, this time focused on transport tools instead of barracks. Otto was brought in as witness because he had found the box and knew the exact cart position. While guards checked wool hubs, coal bins, and wagon frames, Otto noticed scrape marks beneath the same laundry cart axle where the box had rested. The board there was pried loose, revealing a shallow slot lined with grease paper. Inside lay the missing photograph. The picture showed exactly what Voller had described: stacks of parcels beside drums and a wagon in a transfer yard. But in the corner of the frame stood Kessler himself, half turned toward the camera and holding the leather box before it vanished into later transport. The accidental image tied the case to him beyond doubt and joined the scattered packets into a single chain. By afternoon, District orders arrived to transfer all recovered materials under sealed military escort for investigation of parcel diversion, prisoner accounting, and unauthorized movement records. Voller would be held for further questioning, not as a thief, but as the last surviving custodian of Kessler's file. The commandant then assembled the camp before evening meal and read a final statement through the interpreter. Friedrich Kessler had been confirmed dead in the transfer air raid months earlier. In front of the assembled prisoners, the commandant ordered Kessler's name entered into the camp memorial ledger and had a new brass plate fixed to the empty leather case in the administration office. When formation broke, Otto passed the office window and saw the box one last time under the lamp, no longer locked, no longer ownerless, and no longer hidden. The final event was not the opening of the lid. It was the return of a dead prisoner's name to the object he had carried. By the time the formation ended and the yard emptied, the box was no longer hidden, no longer locked, and no longer without a name. And as the prisoners passed the administration window in silence, they saw it resting under the lamp with a new brass plate fixed to its surface, and for the first time since it had been pulled from the dirt, no one tried to guess what was inside, because the only thing that mattered now was the name that had returned to it, a name that had survived even when its owner had not. Thank you for spending this time here. If these quiet, true World War II stories matter to you, subscribing helps this channel continue.